shooting the shit about the Suns since 2019.
What is going on, Jamsters? How you doing today? John Voida coming to you live from lunch because you know what? I feel like I got some stuff to say. I got some things to process, right? Obviously, we're going to have a great show for you tomorrow. We're going to be doing some draft recap and understanding of some of the prospects with no ceilings, Tyler Rucker. And that's what we're going to spend a lot of our conversation on tomorrow is just that, is the draft. But there's so much going on in Phoenix that I can't just talk about the draft. I got to talk a little bit about Kevin Durant and the Desmond Bane acquisition by the Orlando Magic and just the trade market as a whole. And so I figured instead of trying to jam that out into the front end of tomorrow's podcast, let's go ahead and just do a jam session short today. And so thank you to those of you who are watching along live. What up, Suns Digest? What up, Coach Evan B? My boys in the chat. Just wanted to talk about kind of where we're at right now. You know, obviously all of the Kevin Durant trade rumors are running amok. Every guy who ever knew somebody who parked cars at America West Arena in 1997 now is a source. And we're at that point, we're at that tipping point where I think that as Suns fans, we just want to get this fucking thing over with. You know, it's a great place to be in, right? You think about it, every time an offseason comes, you hope that your team is involved with some of the talk. We don't want to be the Chicago Bulls, right? Where time after time after time we don't do anything. We sit on our hands. And while I say the Suns might not always be good, they're always interesting. That is something that applies, especially this offseason, because Kevin Durant, I mean, his potential trade, some would say, is hijacking the NBA Finals coverage. You know, and for those of you who are not watching the finals, I've said this before on the pod. Man, these games are great. It is great basketball. And it's a reminder of how far away the Phoenix Suns are and how trading somebody like Kevin Durant, you need to get assets back that are going to set you on a path to play that level of basketball. In this copycat league, that's what you're always doing, right? Whoever wins the championship, you're like, we need to be them or we need to beat them. So how do we beat them? And that's how teams process the offseason. So when it comes to Kevin Durant, the rumors and the speculation continues to run amok. Obviously, there's the three teams where it's reported that he's interested in going, and that's the Miami Heat, the San Antonio Spurs, the Houston Rockets. And then there's this, and rightfully so, there's this way that the team is navigating where they're like, hey, we're going to operate in the best interest of the Suns. And that's the right way to operate. You know, at the end of the day, when you trade Kevin Durant, you trade Kevin Durant, and you got to get something back that meets your needs. Now, the challenge here is understanding exactly what each one of these teams is offering. And while we know that there's some semblance of a bidding war happening, there's a ceiling to that bidding war. And I think that that's where the Suns have kind of reached a point, knowing that their expectation internally is give this thing up to another week. Next Wednesday, by the NBA draft, they want to have a deal in place. And so there's negotiations. They find out what somebody wants or is offering, and then they can go back to somebody else and try to leverage that against what is being offered by that team. And those teams are probably also talking internally. It's like, hey, man, did they really say the number 2 pick? And the Spurs are like, hey, man, no, we didn't. So there's a lot of posturing. There's a lot of reports that come out that you just can't believe at this point. And we know it. There's report after report after report of where he wants to go, what team's interested. You always have to look beyond the initial report and say who benefits from this. Because in negotiations, the art of the deal, that's what matters. I think another thing that is somewhat sobering is understanding that, again, there is a ceiling to what the return on Kevin Durant is. You look at the facts, all right? 37 years old. Back into his career, still an all-star. He was here in Phoenix for 2 full seasons. He was an all-star in both seasons. So he has that ability to elevate your scoring capabilities as a team, but you're not trading for a player in his prime. You're not trading for a young player with a high prospect. You're trading for a mercenary who, in his last two stops, being Brooklyn and Phoenix, is somebody who's been unhappy. A mercenary who is going to be owed $60 million over, per season after this season, because that's the leverage point, right? Kevin Durant, wherever he goes, the team has to make that decision. We're bringing him in for a 1-year rental, kind of like Pascal Siakam, right? And the Indiana Pacers. They're like, hey, we're going to bring him in for like a 1-year rental and show him why you want to be here. And then we'll sign him to the extension. There's that side of it, which if you're that team, it's a gamble. So how much do you want to give up in that gamble? And then you have his desired destinations where he will sign that contract, and you have to take that into account. And if the Phoenix Suns have proven anything, players who are going into their fourth maximum contract are not a valuable asset as they are. Even though everything on the court says he's a valuable asset, they're not as valuable as we perceive because they hinder you financially. And so a team like the Rockets, in my opinion, makes a lot of sense because they have a good infrastructure. They're looking just north of Houston into Oklahoma City saying, what do we need to beat them? We need scoring. Kevin Durant provides that. But what are they willing to give up? How much are they willing to give up? And that's what, for all the shitting on Matt Ishppia that people like to do, because since he took over, the team hasn't been as successful as we thought it was going to be, because we thought it was a championship level team and we didn't come close to a championship. For all the shitting on Ishppia that's occurred, this team hasn't just gone out and taken the best deal, or I won't say best deal, first deal, and ran with it like they did with Bradley Beal. Right. So there is some structure behind what's occurring. There is a shift in what's occurring. And kudos, at least to this point, for Brian Gregory for not taking the first deal possible. Now, that being said, we'll judge Brian Gregory in the short term and the long term based on the crux of this deal, what actually occurs when it occurs, because it's going to showcase to us, at least, potentially what his negotiation skills are. Because as a general manager, that's what you have to have, negotiation skills. So I still have no idea what this trade is going to be. I know what I would kind of like in a perfect scenario. This is my perfect scenario for Kevin Durant. You trade him to Houston. You trade him to get Jalen Green. You trade him to get Jabari Smith. You trade one other contract within there. Tari Eason would be fantastic. Maybe even Cam Whitmore. And if you could get 2 picks, if you could get, I don't even care about this year. Give me our 27 or our 29 back. That's a fucking home run grand slam, in my opinion, based on the asset you're giving up. Knowing for all the reasons that I stated before, relative to Kevin Durant, the issues, he's getting older, the money that he's owed. And then in a perfect world, you're flipping Jalen Green for something else. You're sending him to another team, either getting back a quality player or you're getting the ability to break up that contract into more players. Because Jalen Green, honestly, doesn't make sense here. What is it with all these teams who are like, hey, here's what we got for you, Suns. You give us Kevin Durant, we'll give you a 2 guard. Like, here's Devin Vassell, here's Jalen Green. Like, motherfucker, we already got two guards. We don't need another 2 guard, right? But if you can trade Jalen Green for something, I think that's, again, a home run. I really like Jabari Smith, and I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I'm biased because I had him on my fantasy team the past couple of years, and I know what he's capable of, and he's still young, and I think that that's important. Now, there's the Desmond Bane deal, and when I look at the Desmond Bane deal, I'm shocked. Not because of the fit for Orlando. It's a perfect fit for Orlando. Orlando's looking up at Boston, who they just played in the playoffs. Says, you know what? They're hurt. They're hurt. No Jalen or no Jason Tatum next year. Who knows what they're going to do with Kristaps Porzingis, Drew Holiday? My guess is they'll keep Derek White, but even Jaylen Brown could potentially be on the market. So the Eastern Conference is wide open this upcoming season. So they're taking a gamble. But what I'm shocked at is they gave up 2 salary fillers, right? Uh, they gave that up. But what's even more shocking is the picks, right? And here's what I don't understand. And if you're watching along in the chat, maybe you can let me know what you think of of that trade. Who won that trade? Did Memphis win that trade or did Orlando win that trade? Because Memphis, they gave up Desmond Bane, but they got back 5 first rounders, 4 unprotected, and a swap. One of those unprotected is a Phoenix pick next year, first rounder. So 4 first round picks and a first round pick swap. And then they also gave up Contavious Caldwell Pope and somebody else, Cole Anthony, right? That's what the Desmond Bane price was. And I'm seeing that trade applauded because Orlando took a chance and the draft capital really didn't matter because they're going to be a good team over the next 5 years. So what's the point? So I find that interesting. I find that interesting because the same people who say that that trade was a success for Orlando because who needs the draft capital are the same people who railroad the Suns for giving up so many draft picks in the deal that included Kevin Durant. Like, so which one is it? I mean, obviously, this is a situation in which we're prisoners of the moment, I think. And you're like, yeah, but Desmond Bain, he's like exactly what they need. It's like, well, yeah, Kevin Durant at the time was exactly what we needed. Yeah, we had an organic team with chemistry, but we needed a solid secondary scorer next to Devin Booker, and it was Kevin Durant. So it's like, how are you going to say no to that? Yes, in hindsight, you would say no, but everybody was excited when it happened. Yeah, we felt that we probably gave up a little too much, but we didn't think it was on the draft pick side. It was like, oh, did we have to include Cam Johnson? We knew Jay Crowder was gone, but Mikal Bridges and Cam, we had to give up both the twins. But the draft capital, I mean, that's what I always thought was, hey, it doesn't matter because we're going to be a competitive team. So who needs the 27th pick every year, the 29th pick every year? Everyone's applauding Orlando for doing it, but the same breath railroading the Suns for being in this situation. So again, it's just an interesting perspective and one that I don't fully understand. Because in my opinion, I think that Orlando gave up just too much for Bane because you don't know what's going to happen. And you need to have some draft capital, as the Suns have proven. And again, I know that the Suns don't control their picks, i.e., if they have a shit season and they come in last, they're not going to have that pick. But they do have picks in the upcoming drafts. And if there's anything we've seen, and if you've ever read any of my writing on Bright Side of the Sun, you know how frustrated I am with the pick swapping that goes on because you're like, yeah, dude, the Suns 2029th, man, that's their pick by way of Orlando through Brooklyn. I think Orlando, but whoever has a better record between Orlando and Memphis, that's where ultimately determines what happens to the Suns. The pick swaps are just effing ridiculous. So again, I think that the Bane situation, for those of you who think it sets the market for Kevin Durant, I don't think that's correct. I think it's an isolated incident. What it does do is it goes, hey, what's Memphis up to? It makes you kind of turn your eyes to Memphis to go, well, what are you doing? And in my head, the way I see it is if the Suns do trade with the Houston Rockets and we do get Jalen Green in a deal, guess who needs a 2 guard to put next to John Morant? Memphis. Hey, here's Jalen Green. What do you got, buds? You just got a bunch of draft picks. Give us our 2026 back. Or give us a couple draft picks. We'll give you Jalen Green and give us, a couple players that fill out our roster and meet the criteria of players that Brian Gregory and Jordan Ott are looking at. So, again, a jam session short. I'm not going to go on too much longer here. If you got any questions in the chat, let me know. But kind of in summation, the Kevin Durant news, we'll know when we know. Stop following the Stan accounts, or follow them if you want. I don't give a shit. But don't take Stan accounts so serious when they say somebody told me that so and so was going to do such. They don't know shit. I love seeing those posts on social media, and you got people asking them underneath like, so what do you know? They know as much as you do, bro. Don't be that stupid. Just saying. Just saying. All right, taking a look at some of the chat before we get out of here. Coach MB says Orlando has a nice squad, though. They do. They do. And as Rar said, Orlando is built on a solid foundation. Suns were shaky at that point. No, it's incorrect. The Suns were not shaky when we gave up for all the draft picks, because I think there was a pick swap in there as well as Jay Crowder, as well as Mikal Bridges, as well as Cam Johnson. We just won 64 games. 2 years prior, we had been to the finals, and we were having a shaky season, quote unquote, but that was due to injuries. It wasn't due to talent. And then Ishppia came in and just bulldozer. Suns Fever 83 says too much given up for Bane, and I agree. It's just a little too much. Ishppia made a horrible trade, says Rar. Hindsight's 2020. Mezzi Aquatics. I love your optimism, Voida. Thank you. I don't know how optimistic I'm being. I'm trying to be a realist in this one because, again, until anything happens, I don't even know what to think or trust. Mark Brooks says the Beal trade was the one that wrecked things. I completely agree with that. I still think that's why we're trading Kevin Durant. We're trading Kevin Durant because the Bradley Beal deal was a fucking disaster. And we now have to choose between Beal and Durant, and you can't do shit with Beal, so you have to do something with Durant to try to course correct, because you can't do this on three maximum contracts. It's not the way the NBA is operated. Because I would love to keep Kevin Durant. Man, I would love to keep Kevin. It's Kevin Durant. Like, you take that $54 million that is Bradley Beal, you break that up into 2-3 quality pieces. This is a much, much different team. Suns Fever, I think Ishppia will blow this again for the third year. We'll see. I think that, again, he's doing kind of a good job because they're being patient. He's been patient this whole offseason. What did Matt Ishppia do when he came in? He wasn't patient. 2 days later, boom, Kevin Durant. Father's Day, 2023, boom, Bradley Beal. I mean, first person who's like, hey, I'd like to go to Phoenix. He's like, done, make it happen. There's been a lot of patience exercise this offseason. Slow roll to Brian Gregory, even slower roll to Jordan Ott, slow roll on the Kevin Durant trade. I think that this front office is being a lot more calculated. Now, again, we can't judge how calculated they've been until we see results, until we hear kind of the ancillary fallout from sources that are actually reputable about what the Suns were offered and how they navigated those offers. Because, again, if they walk out of this with just Jalen Green, Jabari Smith, Cam Whitmore, and like the 10th pick, when potentially more could have been on the table, that's one thing. But if that's the maximum value they can get, that's another thing. And being calculated paid off. So I know people like to shit on Ishppia, but at the same time, like, he's learning as he goes relative to this thing. So we're just going to have to be right there with him. Michael Evans, my sources tell me LM making a German chocolate cake today. Interesting. D-Rock Trainer, let's see if Ishppia learned from the past mistakes. Completely agree. Boyd, I like that Green to Memphis subsequent move. I would love that move. There's stuff you can get there. I don't know if it'd be Triple J or anything that drastic, because I think they still want to compete to some extent. But there's some culture guys. I mean, that's why Memphis has been successful, is they have guys who play a certain way. They play rough, they play gritty. When you're playing Memphis, you're going to play a physical team. And I know that Bane's gone, but give me Brandon Clark. John Paul Edward de Dios. Did KD push for Beal? Probably, but it's a moot point now. Rar, what do you think is the most realistic trade for KD? I think the most realistic trade for Kevin Durant is going to involve a third team, and people are still trying to figure out who that third team is. I think that Minnesota would love to be in the Kevin Durant sweepstakes. I think they have a star in Anthony Edwards who is almost like pounding his fist, demanding that. But I think that given the fact that they're a second apron team and they don't have a lot of draft capital either, it really makes it hard to happen. So I could see something where, like, the Jazz and the Rockets are kind of the three players here, and there's some draft picks move around, and I mean, we'll see. I honestly, I've done mock trade after mock trade, written about them on Brightside. You can go and you can look at them on the website, brightsideofthesun.com. And even after writing all those, I know that I'm like, I didn't get any of these right, because there's just always some miscellaneous factor in there that you don't account for, and no angle that you've truly seen. And so we'll see. I mean, that's all I can say is we'll see. Ted Offensive, has Ishppia ever been patient? He hired a GM with no experience in an MSU link and then hired a head coach that nobody else was considering, also with an MSU link. All right, so first off, people need to get over this MSU shit. I mean, what's so bad about that? Tell me what's bad about that. I can see how it can be seen as collegiate nepotism, and maybe you don't like that, but if you've ever worked in an environment that's a corporate environment and a big position comes open, you know what they don't do? They don't go hire the best candidate from Nike. They hire the person internally who they know, who they trust, who shares similar values. Now, did he hire a GM with no experience? Yes. And was I a fan of that hire? Not really. But again, we're going to have to see how it plays out. So while I'm not optimistic about that hire, I'm not pessimistic either. There's qualifications, there's shared values, there's shared vision, alignment, all that shit. And maybe he's a talking head for Ishppia, perhaps. But we have to see how he operates. Now, the Jornot thing. Do you know why nobody else was considering Jornot? Take a guess. Take a guess. It's because no other team had a head coaching position open. So how could we be considered for a position if no other team had a head coaching position open? The Knicks came open the day before we hired him, but I like Jordan. I think he's going to be really. He's what we needed. He happened to be a video coordinator at MSU. He happened to get his master's there. So yeah, there's that shared familiarity. But he went to Penn State. He coached in a completely different tree. So again, I think that people they're frustrated um with the again perceived collegiate nepotism, but that's the only reason why. And I just don't see it as a valid argument. Uh, like Mark Brooks says, nepotism, cronyism is rampant in the NBA. It is, and everywhere. It just is. I mean, maybe you're against the institution and you're against that mode of thinking, but people are going to go with people who have shared interest and trust. I didn't start a podcast with Matthew because I just thought he was a great analyst, although I appreciate what he says. He's my brother-in-law, man. John and Matthew jam. That's relationships mean something. Suns Fever 83. What's bad about it? Hiring people because they went to your college is an experience. It's the yes man syndrome. Yeah, but to think that that's the only reason why they were hired is incomplete thinking unto yourself. You know what I mean? Like they got hired. Yes, they have a shared culture. If I'm interviewing people for a position and they come from a shared experience, I know what they've experienced, and therefore that relatability is something that I know with how they handled it because I've been in similar situations. All right. So Ted Offensive also in the chat. What's bad about hiring from only one source is the lack of an outside voice. You need a varied perspective instead of just yes men. That's correct. And again, going back to how much time did Jornot spend at Michigan State and how much was that truly a factor in his coaching development? He was just brought in from Cleveland. And before that, he was with the Lakers. And before that, he was with Brooklyn. Before that, he was from Atlanta. So that's all an outside voice. He's from the Kenny Atkinson / Mike Budenholzer, unfortunately, tree of coaching. So you just gotta look at it through that perspective. Don't be so negative, people. And this last comment I'll do before I get out of here because my lunch is almost over. Multi-team trades is the only way not to be fleeced. And I do agree with that. And that's why I think that there's going to be a third team lurking there. It's going to help even out some of the assets and hopefully include some draft capital along the way. So again, thanks for hanging out for this jam session short. We'll be live tomorrow on the channel, 8 p.m. Arizona time, with Tyler Rucker of the No Ceilings Substack and podcast. They do a fantastic job of draft previews, scouting. I mean, that's what they live and die for. So I've got a bunch of questions about a bunch of different prospects, and I want to bring an expert in here. I don't want to tell you my perspective on prospects because that's not what I'm. I don't have a PhD in. I have a PhD in Phoenix Suns and their history and knowing what's going on relative to their mechanics. I don't know scouts or prospects. I'm not a scout. So let's bring in somebody who does. So make sure you tune in for that one. Subscribe, rate, review, all that fun stuff if you feel like it. If not, go Suns. We'll see. We'll see. And no matter what, just remember to go home. Love you.
Podcast, shooting the shit about the Suns since 2019.